Okay, good afternoon, everyone. I hope you're all doing well, wherever you're joining us in from. I think we can now get started as we'll have the rest of the attendees joining in along the way. And I can see that all of our panelists for today have also been able to join in already. So welcome to the Bridging Gaps course. As you've seen, since yesterday being advertised, basically a course that's helping to build their capacity and help to empower students to be able to help recognize the potential of the information they hold in helping to make a change in the community around them. So apologies, the power just went out on my side, but basically today we have three panelists who have been lined up and who will be sharing their experiences in working with different areas of community engagement. And they'll be telling us a little bit about what it takes to be able to reach out to the different communities and how we can be able to help successful and sustainable interventions to come in as students, and how we can be able to have lasting impacts on the communities around us. So the topic, as you know, this is a 4-part series, and today's discussion therefore will be centered on how to approach these different communities in preparation for an outreach as such. So without any further ado, I'll be introducing the three panelists that we have for today. The first one we have is Mr. Samuel Kimani. Mr. Kimani has a experience of over 10 years in social entrepreneurship, having been focusing his work mostly on children and youth that are living and working on the streets. Currently, he's the program director at the Tumaini Innovation Center, which is based here in Eldoret, Kenya, and where he basically engages with at-risk and out-of-school children and youth in a excuse me, in a revolutionary new educational social enterprise, basically that helps these learners to be able to break down the barriers that they face in an otherwise changing society. Mr. Kimani holds a bachelor's degree in education and arts from Moi University, and he's also a licensed high school teacher. At the same time, he's also a Mandela Washington Fellow and a Leaders in Innovation Fellow as well. Over the years, through his work, he's been able to receive multiple development grants from USA, the Japanese-Kenyan National Collaboration, the US Embassy based in Nairobi, as well as the Royal Academy of Engineering for building and developing the Tumaini Innovation Center, which, if you are based in Eldoret, I would highly advise you to be able to check out. I personally have had a privilege of having been able to work with Mr. Kimani and to learn a lot about community engagement. So I really believe that he's going to be able to contribute a lot towards our discussion for today. Our next speaker, our next panelist is Ms. Angela Nambero. Ms. Nambero is a fourth-year medical student here in Moi University. She also has a vast experience having engaged multiple sectors of the community, as well as in student engagement within the student fraternity in Moi University, having been the former national officer for public health with Musake, and also being the current secretary of capacity building at Musake, that's the Medical Student Association of Kenya. So welcome, Ms. Nambero. And our third panelist for today is Mr. Elijah Bull. Mr. Bull is a third-year medical student at Egerton University. He currently is working with Musake as the national officer for the Standing Committee for Human Rights and Peace, that's SCORP. And as you know, SCORP has a special inclination, he has a special inclination to working with refugees and displaced persons. Mr. Bull has also had extensive experience having worked with refugees within the Kakuma refugee camp through his community-based organization, that's the Bulwark Academic Refugees Initiative, that's BARI as an abbreviation, which offers trainings on refugee resilience through education. And at the same time, as we're in the midst of the current pandemic, COVID-19 awareness campaigns being conducted within the camps. Currently, he's also a volunteer youth mobilizer with the UNHCR Kenya. And at the same time, Mr. Bull is a Wells Mountain Initiative, that's WMI, and DAFI, Albert Einstein Academic Refugee Scholarship Scholar. So welcome, Mr. Bull, and welcome to all the three panelists once again to our discussion. If you could kindly turn on your videos if you can, and just to know that you're all in, and your microphones as well. Yes, I see you, Bull. And Angela.
Hi.
Okay, and there's Mr. Kimani. Okay, so I think we can then just dive right into the discussion that we'll be having today. So as you know, we have the three panelists here, and what we'll be doing is an open panel session where we'll basically be seeking your insights and your opinions on the different communities that you've been able to work with, and how we'll be doing this is through some structured questions and objectives that we'll be trying to target in this case. So what I'll be just sharing the general objective of the topic that we'll be talking about, and then I'll basically be seeking your insight on how your experience in engaging that sector or that part of the community has been like with regards to this objective. So the first objective that we want to address today is, first of all, just to get a general idea about what your area of community engagement is and what has your experience been like in working with this community. So maybe Mr. Bull, you can start us off. You sound a little distant. I don't know, maybe it's your microphone. Not yet better.
Can you be able to hear me now?
Yes, perfect, perfect.
Okay, thank you. So what was the question again? Sorry.
So first of all, what is your area of community engagement and what has your experience been like in working with this specific section of the community?
Okay, thank you. So my area of community engagement has been working with refugees. So one fun fact about me is I've been a refugee for the last 18 years, registered as a refugee in Kakuma refugee camp. And since then, I've been working with refugees, not only in Kakuma refugee camp, but also in urban centers like Nairobi, Eldoret, Nakuru, and also other refugee camps like the Dadaab refugee camps, which has E4 and other refugee camps that are linked together. So I've been working with refugees all along, and mainly partly because of my work as a NOB, like National Officer for Human Rights and Peace with Msake, and also through my personal community-based organization, which you mentioned, BARI, that is Bulwark Academic Refugee Initiative. So my area of work has been with refugees all along. Now, one thing that you've learned, that you can learn when you work with refugees is, one thing, if you get to recognize that refugees are stateless people, they're not recognized as linked to any particular state. The fact that they have left their country of origin and they're living as a refugee in another country, it renders them stateless. So if you get to recognize that these are people that need help and they have a lot of problems and other issues that you can be able to provide solutions to, then you become a vital part in the refugee life in providing those solutions. So I've been basically working with refugees in providing solutions that face refugees, and currently also creating awareness about the COVID-19 in the refugee camp through my CBO. And then initially, I got a grant that is financial assistance to be able to create awareness in Kakuma refugee camp in particular. And we were able to distribute a lot of water tank and hand washing centers in many many particular points in Kakuma refugee camp. And that was really successful because many people got help and they got the basic information about the COVID-19 and also how they're supposed to protect themselves and protect their neighbors from the COVID-19. So I've basically been working with refugees. Thanks.
Thank you. That's very inspiring. And I think your efforts are definitely paying off. We have very few numbers usually being registered on those sides. The next maybe panelist who can speak is Angela.
Hi once again. Can you hear me?
Angela. Yes, we can perfectly.
Actually representing Sharon Kiptoo, the founder of Bridging Gaps Initiative. And I'll speak from her experience and my experience. From my own experience, I've been working with street families, children homes, and high schools, distribution of pads. I've been all over. But from Sharon's perspective, she started this initiative in around July, where she's trying to curb the rising cases of teenage pregnancies in Keio North, Elgeyo Marakwet. And from her own experience, as I've been talking to her, she's my friend. She said that she had some high and low moments because she ended up meeting different people with different points of view, different cultures. But by the end of the day, she had to accept that in as much as people are different, you need to accept that, but there's always a common ground. From my experience working in different settings, when it comes to maybe children's home, you need to understand that the children's home have a set of values, and you can't like cross those values. And you need to, if you're teaching the children about sexual education or about hygiene, you need to put in consideration what the children's home management is trying to pass on to the children. And you also need to consider the trauma these children have, not to mention anything that might trigger them. If you're working in a village setup in the rural areas, you need to understand their culture, because in some settings, women are not supposed to say certain things, or women are not supposed to talk to certain groups of people. You need to understand that so that you can work with them. If you're going to street families, there are structures. In as much as some people might think street families don't have an organized way of living, or they don't have what do I call it? They are don't have a structured way of living with each other. They do. They have leaders. They have people you need to approach to talk to the street children and street families. So it's important to understand values and structures so that you can get to the people in the community. And you need to also understand their culture to know what message you need to pass to them and in what kind of way. Yes.
Thank you, Angela. And I think that's a very important point that you've sort of brought out, that I think cuts across for any type of engagement that you'd want to do. You just don't go and start making the rules yourself. You have to basically enter into the existing structures and try and see how best you can have a lasting impact from that level. And don't try to sort of recreate everything to your perfection, but rather work with what are the needs based that are originating from the community itself. Thank you, Angela. And I think in absentia, I think Sharon's doing definitely a tremendous job in her initiative, and we definitely look forward to hearing more about it along the way. Before I go to Mr. Kimani, the attendees, if you kindly have any questions, any clarifications, or any comments, you're welcome to please share them within the chat box. We will have two series of Q&A sessions, time slots that have been allocated. One is in the between of this session, and then one is at the end of it. So if you have any questions, please feel free to share them over there, and then we'll try and answer them at the designated times. So lastly, for this objective, Mr. Kimani, please tell us about your area of community engagement and what has your experience been like thus far in working with this specific area of the community.
Hi, everyone. My name is Samuel Kimani, the director of Tumaini Innovation Center. I work with street-connected young people and also children. My experience for this population that I would love to share is that to build rapport and trust, first of all, you have to go to where the community is. It is not possible to work with a community from a distance. And it is very, very important that you go to where they are based so that you can develop that trust, because most people, when they are working with communities, try sometimes to work with them remotely. And at-risk community feel stigmatized, feel shunned. And so that love, that embracement by where you are going to where they are makes a lot of difference to them. So that is one. The other thing is that, as it's rightful said, when you go to the Romans, do what the Romans do. It is key that you get to understand the dynamics in that community. For example, if people greet. If people sit before they talk, you do that. So it's those are very key things, because for some communities, if they extend their hands, especially street children, you do not greet them, simply meant you are not prepared to go and meet them. Because when you do that, then they start feeling the distance and the stigma that they are faced from other people. So I think those are my opening remarks, that you have to get to where they are and you have to do what they do so that they can be able to accept you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kimani. And I think that's a very important insight you've brought in, especially when it comes to where we're supposed to start from. We can't wait for the community to bring their problems to us. It's for us to be able to go and reach out and work with them at the ground level, basically, and try to build up the solutions from there with them at the same time. Thank you. So moving on, we can go on to the next area of discussion that we can now build on. Sorry. So the next part is about now, in each case, we've tried to listen in, and we've brought in different areas of the community that basically our panelists are working in. We have Mr. Bull working specifically with refugee communities. We have Mr. Kimani, who works with street children and street connected youth. And then we have Angela, who is basically representing both. It's more of cutting across. We have both the engagement at the community level in terms of the street populations, as well as working with peers, as well as working with children in school settings, for example. So it more cuts across for her. Now, before we decide that we want to try and, let's say, start off a project or start off any engagement with any community, there is definitely something very distinct about each of these communities and these populations that we've talked about. So to our panelists, what are some of the unique characteristics, or what are some of the unique features associated with these communities that would be important for somebody to consider when they want to think about engagement? We can start with Angela.
I'll first of all speak from the rural setting village community. The unique thing you need to note about the rural setting is, first of all, religion, because in a unlike in the urban setting where everyone is busy, people are exposed to other ideas and religions. In the rural setting, people have a narrow-minded way of thinking when it comes to religion. So you just can't go to Kerio North and start telling teenagers you need to use contraceptives, and you need to, if you're active, you need to do your STI checking, HIV testing, because the community will say you're demonic and you're encouraging their children to be moral. So you need to find a way around that and be creative and clever about it. Also, the other thing you need to note is culture. You need to learn what maybe the Kalenjins do, maybe what the Kikuyus do, so that you don't upset them. Also, how you dress. You just can't go wearing some tight trouser with a crop top, and how women dress there is they wear long dresses and long skirts. So you also need to consider culture. Also, the politics. Politics run, as in everything runs on politics. You need to know, are we going to approach the chief? Are you going to approach the MP? Are you going to approach the women rep? Because in as much as you're going to the community, the leaders need to know. If you don't inform the leaders, if you don't inform the elders, definitely they'll cut you short in the process and your message won't reach the population. When it comes to maybe the street families, language is important. Who's in charge, because they have a structure. They have maybe Mama who takes care of them, or the big boys in the crew. If you're going to high schools, you need to consider the age. You need to consider the level of understanding. You need to consider the leadership. That's what I can say about the special characteristics of the community I've interacted with.
Thank you, Angela. Just to follow up on, I think the first point you brought out. Now, you mentioned that some of them, due consideration to some of the entrenched religious and cultural values is quite critical. Now, how would you therefore, how does that influence the degree of penetration, if I may say, in terms of an intervention that you were thinking of can be done? Does that mean that if you face a barrier like that, you just stop right there because now you can't proceed with it? But how does that shape what you would want to do, for example?
first of all, before you approach the community, you need to talk to a few people and learn their way of thinking and how they do things. For example, in Sharon's case, since she wanted to tell the girls about use of contraceptives and them reducing their, I don't know, as in kupunguza their sexual activity. And people are religious and they know that their children are not sexually active, they're not, participating in such things. The best way she did it and the best way we were doing it is to, instead of telling the girls to use contraceptives, you tell them, there are other possible ways of preventing pregnancies, but for now, avoid sex. So eventually you've passed the message, but you're like sugarcoating it, like you're unaipaka mafuta, so that the community, yes, they'll accept your message, but your audience have already gotten it. It's you're trying to juggle your words. Eventually, you have to be, in short, you just have to be smart on how you pass the message. By the end of the day, the message has to reach, and there's no other way around it. I don't know if I've explained it vizuri.
Yeah, actually, yes, you have, because it clearly comes out that there's no concrete way of really doing it. You have to really try and base it on the situation and try and see what kind of approach would be best without necessarily triggering any.
Try and put yourself in their shoes and think of what better way would you want to hear this message. Yes.
Sure. So definitely, and I think therefore the approach will definitely be born out of these unique considerations and characteristics that you have to first recognize and appreciate in the community setting that you're trying to engage, basically, in this context. How is it in the refugee setting, Bull? What are some of the unique characteristics that you can say out of experience, out of your initiatives that come forth?
One unique thing with the refugees is the fact that they're coming from different countries and they've been brought together. So in order for you to get to reach them, you really have to understand what is the real issue that was the problem at first, what led to their displacement from the original country of origin. So if you get to understand that, because there are many reasons that people become refugees, others are seeking asylum from maybe political instabilities from their countries, others have been displaced through civil wars, there are a lot of reasons. So if you get to understand the root cause of why they were displaced in the first place, then you can be able to work with them initially. I mean, adequately, because it will feel that you know them. So one unique thing about refugees is they're coming from different countries and they're living together. Now, another thing is for refugees to live in one setting, most of them are put into refugee camps. And refugee camps is so different from any other camps, not like a major city. Most of the refugee camps are from low economic backgrounds. There are no well-developed infrastructure. There are no permanent buildings. So most people live in camps or any other temporary buildings. So in order to get to access them, you have to accept that you have to live with them in such a setting. You have to understand what they experience at night and during the day, because the refugee setting is different from all the other settings. Like, it's not like a major city or something like that. So they come from low economic backgrounds. And now one thing that you can understand is refugees are supported by different organizations, and not all organizations focus on one particular point. There are organizations that focus on health, there are those that focus on food, there are those that focus on education, there are those that focus on security. So if your line of work, if the solution that you're trying to provide is academic, you have to partner with that particular organization or that particular NGO or United Nations organization that works with, that is given that particular part in delivering those services to the refugees. So it involves partnership. You cannot do it alone, because it will mean that you're not recognizing what other organizations are doing. So another important thing with refugees is since they're coming from different backgrounds and different countries, you'll really experience a lot of language barriers. So that is really unique about refugees, because all of them are coming from different places and they speak different languages. So if you go with one particular language, let's say Swahili, there are refugees that are coming from a country that doesn't recognize Swahili or that doesn't even understand Swahili. So you have to work with the particular organization, with the particular community that you're trying to approach, using their elders to act as interpreters, so that you get to pass your message across in their local dialect. So those are a few things that you need to know about refugees. Thanks.
Thank you, Elijah. And I think your scenario sort of contrasts quite differently from the rural example that Angela was giving, wherein in that context, you already have the basic structures in place. You have already functional administrative structures that you can easily go through. And the only challenge now is the social, religious, cultural values to consider. But here, the complexity is a lot more. You have people who are not only distinct in terms of their geographical origins, but also they have different experiences that have led them to come as refugees. And at the same time, the structures aren't all that efficient as well. So this one definitely requires a more intricate level of engagement, because you have to really take consideration of a lot more than just what these values are that they hold, right?
Yeah.
Okay, thank you, Elijah. How is it, Mr. Kimani, how is it with the street-connected children and youth? What are some of the unique characteristics that you would say define, or such rather are sort of encountered with this population?
My apologies. I'm also on some errand.
It's okay.
Driving, but I'm doing well, I hope.
It's okay. You're perfect.
Okay, so I think for me, one of the biggest things that we did at the beginning was the tool that we used to reach the population. Some hard to reach population, especially I would say some people who, population that people look at as a menace or as violent, like street connected children or youth, especially the youth, the older ones. You'd need a tool. And that tool is key in the point that you have to use gatekeepers. So one of the things that we did with gatekeepers, and those are the older street youth, was soccer. So we used football. So I remember the first times I used to go to the street, I was very fearful of this population. And rightly so, because many people say that street children are difficult or are violent. For me, right now it's not true. But that time, 10 years ago, I thought it was true because of the things people had told me about this population. So we used soccer. We went there with a soccer ball every Saturday afternoon, and we played. And we didn't even know the names of these kids. But interestingly, during the soccer match, you'd hear someone calling Kibet, someone calling Boiler. So through that process, you'd start knowing their names. And I remember when the very long soccer match ended, they asked us if we are coming the next Saturday. And that is key, because they want to trust you. They want to feel that you really need them and you're not just coming there for the sake of it, or you're doing it because of your religious purposes, or you're doing it just to feel good. So when we came the next Saturday, the ball disappeared. But several Saturdays down the line, the ball was recovered because they trusted us. They knew these guys were in here for good. So I think if you, for example, if you want to reach to Al-Shabaab and you want to talk to them, we want to provide healthcare services, it is key to understand what kind of tool you can use. That does not necessarily mean you're going to go there with your forms or with your provisions that you're going to provide to them. What is the way to engage them at the beginning? That necessarily does not mean you go and start talking to them about what you want to do. So a strategy is key when you want to approach communities.
Okay, and I think the legacy of the weekly soccer has basically lived on with Tumaini since then. And we've really seen how well it works actually to be able to integrate new people coming in as well. And I think that's definitely a great point to start off from. And I think your point has also brought out something very unique as well that hasn't been encountered with the other two settings, is that the kind of social definitions and descriptions and stereotypes that have sort of been built around these communities really do have to be considered, because I mean, like, before engagement, I mean, almost everyone is basically given the same idea as you described, how to associate street children and what they're basically considered from a stereotypical perspective. But and it's only through recognizing that through that direct approach, it may not work, but rather you have to find that common ground is how you've been able to sort of build that rapport and build that trust to now ultimately engage them effectively. And I think that's something, for example, working in a rural setting, or maybe, for example, with the refugees, because you've already gone through the structured or the concrete administrative channels may not be challenges that are easily encountered. But for the street children, because of the reputation, or rather the stereotypes that have built around it, really do act as a hindrance, as you mentioned.
Yeah.
Great. Thank you very much to the three panelists for this section of it. So as I mentioned, we're supposed to have a short Q&A section right now, but I'm not seeing any new comments or questions come into the chat box. If anybody would like to just unmute themselves and speak up, that's still fine. So I'll just give a few minutes for that up to this point. Alternatively, you can always type your question in the chat box, and I can just read them out to the panelists that you're intended to ask that to, if you'd like to do that as well. Okay, so I think in that case, what we can do is we can move on to the next section of the discussion for today, and we can push all the questions to the last. Okay. Yeah, I don't think there's nobody's raised their hand. Okay, so I think, yes, we can move on to the next bit of the discussion for today. And then if you have any questions, as mentioned, please just continue typing that out in the chat box, or alternatively, at the tail end of this discussion is when we'll open it up to anybody who would like to engage any of the panelists directly as well. So you can always feel free to ask them directly as well. So the third part now is something that actually has already come up, but now would be better, sort of in your own words, to better describe from the panelists the kind of challenges basically that you've gone through reaching to the point where you are right now. So for example, in the case of the project that Angela is representing, what some of the most important challenges were that you've come across basically while engaging the rural community in the outreach that you've done so far.
Pardon, that question is directed to me?
Yes, yes. We can start with you. Yes, sorry.
Some of the challenges that were experienced in the KU North Building Gaps initiative was if you're known in that setting, if you're known in that community, first of all, people have already judged you from the family you come from. For example, Sharon is from, maybe a well-known, from a good background, a well-known family. So when she wants to go to the community and talk to the local girls and talk to the local women, they've already had a judgment on who she is, where she's from, and they've assumed that whatever she's going to tell them isn't such a big deal and she doesn't understand them. And it really took time for them to accept her, because she had to go to them, hang around with them, play, maybe ball with them, maybe take food to them, and whatever maybe some of the girls do, maybe to fetch firewood or go to the cattle dip or go to the river. She had to do that with them so that they can accept her and understand that Sharon is not who we thought she was, and she's not her family, she's not her from the home she comes from. That was one of the challenges. The other challenge was politics. you get that once you start a good initiative in a community, maybe an MCA somewhere, or a woman rep somewhere sees what you're doing and she's like, maybe this young person wants to ruin my reputation. I'm not doing anything, and in as much as some of them you try to approach them and present your idea to them, at first they ignore you and don't want to accept your idea because you're a young person. But when they see it's prospering, they come with their chests and tell you that, oh, whatever you're doing is what you wanted to do before. But you have to persevere and win the hearts of the community. You need to win the heart of the people. Eventually, they'll see what you're doing is good, and they'll have to incorporate you in whatever they wanted to do. But by the end of the day, you've already benefited the community. The other challenge was culture, where you get that you've known a certain type of way of life, and they've known a certain way of life, and at first, yes, you learn what they do, you learn what the Romans do, but at first you make some small mistakes, and you need to be patient with that. If you make a mistake, you like cross their boundaries, you apologize, and you move on. That's just how it is. You need to make them understand that you're human and you're part of them, and you can do what they do. Yes.
Right. And how has that impacted how your program has basically run across? So, for example, how many meetings did you have to have, for example, trying to overcome these challenges? How did you have to? How many times did you have to go back to the drawing board because of some of these issues?
Countless times. Because there are some days. I'd say it's unplanned, because you always have to come back and meet with the rest of the group and say, what did you do today? What did you hear? What are the rumors going around? What is the community saying? Are we benefiting them? Are we not benefiting them? And you constantly need to change. You constantly need to fit in the community, because if you want to change people, they need to feel you're part of them, and you need to go over your emotions and you need to overcome your own personal issues to benefit the community. So you really have to persevere. You really need to tolerate people, because some will insult you on your face, but you need to show them love. You need to be compassionate until eventually people warm up, but you need to persevere. Yes, they need to see that you are for them.
Okay, thank you for your insight, Angela. Mr. Kimani, do share some of your experiences on what your challenges have been over your 10 years of experience thus far. What some of the issues you've come across that have led you to sort of restructure or change your approach totally?
For me, I think the biggest thing is you have to look at the population you're serving as also specialists. They're your first consultants. At the beginning, when we were starting to work with street children, we went to them with a very prescriptive, subjective way of, the solutions to them is getting off the streets, getting into school, hopefully even becoming a medical doctor and graduating, that's what you'd wish for every child that you meet. But then we quickly noted that most of these children were not interested in the long-term education system. They're already street smart. They're already young adults, although they were children. They had made money. They had already engaged in adult stuff, if you may call it. And they felt like they were adults. Some of them, as young as 14, thought that they had, wives. And if they were 16 or 18 and they had children already, they felt like, they were husbands and the parents. So when you tell them to go back to school, they tell you, Baba mzima kama mimi, I cannot go back to school. So that is key, to understand that when you go to them, do not impose onto them some of the solutions you're having. Rather, especially using design thinking, where together with them scope the problem, come up with a myriad of several solutions, and then from there select one solution that works for them. So when you go with that design thinking mindset, it becomes easy because together with the people you want to support or to serve, you're designing a solution, but you're not coming and say, hey, my name is Ash, for example, and I know that you guys suffer from a lot of chest problems, and you're very susceptible, for example, to COVID, and here is my solution. Please go to them and ask them, what kind of challenges have you faced during COVID? And what do you think are some of the solutions to those challenges? And together we can come up with one of the best programs because they felt that they were consulted, they were respected, their space and their opinions were also respected. That is very, very key. So that do not come up with a whole scope of a project in a room or do it in a laptop and then assume that you're just going and copy paste it to the population you want to serve. Go there and tell them, I want to learn. By you learning, therefore, you develop their trust. And they also feel like they were respected, and therefore that becomes very easy to you in terms of even changing the scope of the program, rather than spending a lot of, we spent about 12 million in 5 years, only to realize that we are doing it wrong before the kids told us the right way of doing it. And that's why we have the Tumaini Innovation Center currently. And it's always under change. Even right now, we are going through a lot of changes. And all these changes are not only brought in by the kids themselves, but also policymakers like government. So it's very important to be cognizant of the people you serve before coming up with the whole project all the way to the results. You know, some of us, I remember you can easily come up with a project, come up with, the budget, and come up with the results and say, hey, I'm going to affect 1 million street children in the end of 12 months time. I know it's hard because sometimes donors want to see all that, or the people that you want to ask for support, even the community, other doctors would want to tell you, hey, if you want to do something, we want to know what we are getting ourselves into. So you say, hey, man, this is a project, I've written it down, this is a budget, and these are the results we are anticipating. Well, all that is good, but remember that when you go to the community, they are the specialists. They are your first consultants. Work with them, listen to them. It becomes very easy for you in the long run. Thanks.
Thank you. And I think from the beginning, you've actually sort of given your experience on how, and correct me if I'm wrong, but I think it was an approach that was quite similar to how some of the other models working with street children work, whereby you just want to go to a street like family or a street person, tell them you're going to pick them off the street and then drop them into a center and then force them to go through school and live a normal life and just suddenly expect them to integrate. But clearly that was not the case.
Yeah, that's not been the case. Interestingly, right now we have a vocational school, and what we are learning is a lot of the youth on the street are not interested to come all the way to Tumaini. And we are now talking about how do we get the program back to them. They tell us we are busy, we are making money. Girls, for example, I feel bad that we haven't done a lot with girls, because girls have told us over and over, we feel old enough because we are parents. We do not have time to sit down and start learning a course. Would you rather bring that closer to us? So we are thinking of using technology in order to provide vocational training and doing it in an innovative way that we may not be the one providing it, but other artisans and businesses, garages, welder shops, salons in town that can be able to do that. So we are thinking of how to do it best that way. Yeah.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for your insight. What about yourself, Elijah? What are some of the challenges that you've encountered, and how has that made you change the approach that you've taken over the time towards the program that you're working on?
One major thing that you will encounter when you're working with the refugees is a refugee camp is like a totally different country within a country. Like let's talk of example of refugee camps that are within Kenya. The policies that are in refugee camps are so different from the common policies that are in other areas of Kenya. So one major problem that you will encounter, or as a challenge when you're dealing with refugees, are policies. There are different policies that are exclusively for refugees, and there are they're not involving other people that are not refugees. So let's take an example. You want to go and work in a refugee camp. One thing that you'll have to find so hard is accessibility. Getting you into the refugee camp itself inside is really hard because there are myriads of documents that you'll have to find. There are ways that you'll have to approach the local authorities and tell them what you're going to do and how long you're going to be there and what organization you're going to partner with. So there are different policies that are exclusively for refugees. So policy is one major challenge that you will encounter when you're working with refugees. So now with policies come with accessibility. So when you want to go into a refugee camp, you don't just go with your national ID or anything like that. There's specific documents, like the traveling document that you'll have to find, and there's specific places where they're gotten from. So if you do not know all those policies, it will be really challenging and hard to work with refugees. So how I have come to find my way into refugee camps and working with them, it has been helped mostly because I'm one of them. I'm a refugee and I have specific documents that are required to be in refugee camps. So if I want to go to a refugee camp, I really have to find the traveling document apart from the other documentations that I have. And once I've gotten those documents, which they may be hard sometimes, especially with the COVID right now that many organizations are working at home, it will be hard. It's mostly hard to get those documentations. So another thing that you will find once you're already in the refugee camps is you'll find that refugees have a lot of challenges and problems. And the major organization, the UNHCR, that is working with refugees cannot be able to solve all those problems at once. So there are priorities that are set on what is going to be set as the first thing. And since most of them are displaced from their from their countries of origin, the major problem that is given the first priority is food. So they're given food. Now, other facilities or other services like water and health and education, they lag behind. And that is where most help come in. So in order to work with refugees, you'll have to find exactly where the need is. Because if you come in and you try to provide food, the World Food Program will say like, no, this food is not certified, not specifically for refugees and something like that. Another major problem that you'll encounter mostly in refugee camps is most refugees have mental challenges. Most of them are suffering from PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder, others are ECD, and many others. So all those mental challenges, you'll have to factor them in. If you want to provide services like maybe you're offering vocational tuition, or maybe you're trying to teach some youths in those communities, because if you approach them with the normal approaches that are in other places, like let's say you want to teach children and you're coming with sticks or maybe canes or maybe whips or something like that, they will be able to, it might trigger some mental, maybe a mental situation that they experience back at home, maybe during that time of war, something like that, and it may be hard talking to them or approaching them. So you'll have to understand that these are people that have been displaced and they have issues that they came with, and handling those issues will require patience and other strategies. So those are the challenges that you'll easily experience when you're working with refugees. The priorities are not given to the main services like education or maybe health or something like that. So you'll find that in refugee camps, most of the problems, they come with lack of hygiene or sanitation or something like that, because the priority has been given to food. So those challenges are so common, and that's where people like us come in to provide other services that are inadequate in refugee camps. Thanks.
Thank you. And so you've mentioned that, okay, you're able to sort of circumvent the whole policy requirements to be able to gain access. But how have you tailored your initiatives to try and address the aspect of what area or what target needs you're trying to meet, and at the same time, how do you implement that aspect of trying to give consideration to the psychological perspective, so that you don't end up trying to direct an intervention that ends up triggering any past experiences that were not really that were really bad for them. So how have you tried to incorporate some of these aspects to try and best deliver your agenda?
Now, the main thing that I've done when I'm dealing with refugees in such a sector, especially I'm working with issues to do with academics and maybe creation of awareness. So the major thing that I've done is partnering with other organizations that are professionals in those areas. So when you partner with them, they can be able to provide you with adequate resources that are required for training and creation of awareness, and that are required for educational purposes. So when you partner with them, they can be able to guide you adequately on what is required. So you bring in some manpower and other resources that may be inadequate initially to them. But when you join forces together, it's easy to work with other organizations through partnership. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that insight. So I think we've really sort of learned a lot about what these are very unique populations that our three panelists have sort of already given us insights about, whereby we've tried to see what the definitions or what the basic what you're basically working from or building upon from with each of these populations, and what the unique experiences have been of each of our panelists in terms of the specific challenges and the approaches that they've been able to take to be able to sort of avoid or overcome these challenges in the work that they do, and how they've been able to do it so far. And I think that's sort of, there's been some of unique features that have come about, which are sort of very specific to individual populations. Like we've seen, for example, we have this misconception of this idea towards straight children, and we have to sort of try and see how we can best overcome this. And then for the refugees, we have these unique complexities in that they're individuals who are not only in a foreign country from very different areas, but also they've had to undergo this past experiences of trauma due to political or social or economic unrest, and that sort of has really built a foundation, if I may say, that you have to sort of take into consideration when you're trying to consider any approach or any intervention that you want to make when trying to work with them. So the next part is now more of a practical perspective. So this one is now an open sort of approach in how all of our attendees here can benefit as well, and how they can sort of start kindling inside them ideas on how they can start working with not necessarily these populations, but other populations and communities that they would like to work with. So I think I'll start off with Angela. So sorry, just a minute. Yes. So Angela, if I or anybody else in this attendance today was to approach the rural population or the community that you've worked with in your organization with Sharon, basically, how would we do this? How would I go about it? What would I start with? How would I build upon that? And where would I take my ideas from going forward from there?
Okay, if you want to approach the rural setting with your project, maybe for distribution of pads, or you want to do maybe a blood pressure campaign, anything to do with the rural setting, first of all, you need to understand the structure. Who will you approach first? In rural settings, you have Nyumba Kumi, the Nyumba Kumi initiative. So in every Nyumba Kumi, you'll have like an elder. You need to find out who the elder is. And the only way to find out who the elder is to approach the chief. Talk to the chief, and the chief will describe to you where your target audience is. Is it in a certain village? Is your target audience at school? Is your target audience always at the cattle dip? Is your target audience always at the quarry? And in that target audience, who will you talk to so that you can reach out to them and for them to inform them that you'll be coming? That's the first thing you need to do. And in case you see that your project is creating a certain change and it will like bring some sort of conflict with the bigger people like the MCAs, the women rep, if you're talking to girls, you need at least to talk to the women rep and present your idea to them and say, this and this is what I want to do to the women in my community. Do you want to be part of it? Do you want to sponsor us? And if they accept, it's okay. If they don't, you move on with your project and then they'll join you. The other bit is if you want to approach the community and you don't have enough money, if you want to talk to the girls all you need is to talk to the chief and the Nyumba Kumi person, and you start talking to the girls. But if you want to get donors, I've got a question on the chat. Someone asked, do you get the donors to support your project and then carry on with it, or you get the donors first and carry on with your project? If you can do your project without money, which most of the project you can do without money, involves just talking to people and doing good, do it, start. But if you start your project, it's easier to approach the donors and tell them this and this is what you've done. Would you mind chipping in so that we provide the girls with these pads? And most donors prefer giving you things in kind and not money. Rarely will they give you money because they don't trust Africans and Kenyans with money. So you tell them, I want pads to distribute it to this and this. I want food to distribute to the street children. I want clothes to distribute to the street children. And you don't need big donors like World Vision. You can also ask your friends to chip in, etc. But you need to be genuine about it. The other bit is there's always a saying: if you want to approach a king, if you want to approach people, you need to take a gift to them. As Dr. Kimani has said, the way they approach the street families is they introduced a football match. If you want to approach maybe people in the village, what do they lack? Is it food and you want them to warm up to you by taking food to them? Is it fun and games? So you come up with some football match or some kati, and the village people come to it so that they know who you are and they warm up to you. You also need to find a solution. What solution are you taking to the community? If you're approaching the kids in the children's home, if you're approaching teenagers in high schools, if you're approaching people in the rural setting, what different thing are you telling them? What solution are you providing to them? Don't just come and waste their good time. Are you solving their water issue? Are you solving the violence, domestic violence in the area issue? Are you solving the teenage pregnancy issue? They need to know what solution are you bringing to the table. Yes, that's what I can say.
Thank you, Angela. And I think there's an important point that you sort of brought out from a question that was directed to you. So that means should we have ready resources already set up? And like, is it a must for us to be having like a huge amount of resources to start off with for us to truly work with the community, or simply just going out to a community and working with them and talking to them can equally be just as impactful? What are your thoughts on that?
The best things in life are free. So if you ever want to help someone, I don't think you need much to help anyone. I don't think you need like millions or some silo somewhere with a lot of food to help someone. You just need the willpower and love to share what the little you have with them. Along the way, if you help people, things always work out. Someone somewhere always sees what you're doing. And even the people in the community themselves will come and approach you and tell you, by the way, Angela, we love you, what you're doing. You want to bring water to us. And last month, there was this organization that tried to come and help us here and here. Maybe you should try and talk to them, And if you're doing whatever you're doing in the community, word always spreads so fast. So there'll be an organization that will hear, hey, by the way, there's this and this girl doing something somewhere in the community, and they'll approach you. That's how Sharon was approached by World Vision. That's how she was approached by the Women Rep. And you also need to be vocal about what you're doing. Kuwa na kiherehere. If you're seeing what you're doing is important for the community and you think there's a need, approach the right people. Go, even if you're seeing a governor passing by, go and tell them, by the way, governor, this and this is what is happening, and I think you should help your people. Because in as much as they are our leaders, they can't solve every problem. And if you have the the will to solve, do it. And the way Bull is doing, Bull knows the problems of refugees, and it's not that he has a lot, but he knows what they're going through, and he has seen what he can do for them. And in the process, somewhere will see what he's doing, and things always work out. Just do it. Just do it. Yes.
I think that last phrase is perfectly sums it up. So you don't need to wait to sort of gather all these fancy resources for you to start engaging communities. You just need to go out there and start with the little you have, and then the rest will just build along the way. And you before you know it, you're having a much bigger impact than you had even initially imagined you would. Thank you for the insight, Angela. Bull, what are your thoughts on that? If anybody had an idea to start engaging, let's say the refugee population, and where would they start from? How would you approach them? And where would an idea even, for example, come from? And where would you go from there?
Thank you so much. So like what Angela said, there are structures that are supposed to be followed. Now the structures with refugees are kind of different, because if you want to access any refugee setting or any refugee camp, the first thing that you have to do is go to the organization that is in charge of refugees. That is the UNHCR, United Nations High Commissioner for Refugees. So the headquarters that are in Nairobi for the UNHCR Kenya. So once you are in UNHCR Kenya, then you will seek your way to the local refugee camp that you like to create an impact in. Let's say you are in UNHCR Nairobi, and then you want to create an impact in Kakuma refugee camp all the way to Turkana. So once you're given permission, they will be able to facilitate your the documentation, the specific documents that you need to get into a refugee camp. And once you're in the refugee camp, now once you are in the camp, there are other organizations that you have to partner with. They're offering almost the same services that you would like to offer, or the same kind of solutions that you would like to provide to the refugee camps. So you partner with them. Now, when you partner with them, there are policies that you have to agree to, those policies that are specific to refugees. Now, but the one thing that you have to remember, when COVID came, people were introduced to new terms like curfew and all that stuff. But then let me tell you, curfew has always been there in refugee camps throughout. There are specific times that you have to be out, and there are specific times that you have to be in refugee camps. So it has always been there. If you are working with refugees, you don't have to wait until it's 6 p.m. to get out if you're not a refugee, and you don't have to be found inside, because there's specific policing. There are the GSU, the General Service Unit, that is in charge of security. And if you're found, you'll be treated like any other kind of intruder, because a refugee camp is considered, it's treated like a different country on its own. It has its own policies. So you have to agree to those policies. So, and then another important thing that I came to realize when I was working with, using my community-based organization, the BARI, is community involvement is so vital. Now, there are many things that I couldn't have done alone, except when I got to involve the local leaders. Now, the leaders in the refugee setting are so different. They have zonal, refugees are divided into zones and blocks. So you have to talk to the block leaders and the zonal leaders and get them to agree to what you're providing. Once you are together, then they'll be able to help you in delivering the services and also providing the solutions that you're providing. Now, another important thing is provide the local people that are not even in any leadership position. So when I was providing the COVID-19 awareness in Kakuma refugee camp, the only thing that I did is I came up with 20 settings, like 20 blocks. And out of those blocks, I came up with ambassadors, local people, the youths, the people that are kind of influential, but they're not in any leadership position in the camp. And then I trained them. And now I was using these people to train the communities. So it's really important to involve the local people that are not even in any leadership positions, but they are influential in a way. They're respected. So if you get to involve them, they will be simplifying your activities, and you'll not have a lot of work to do. Your work will be so simple. You work with the ambassadors, and the ambassadors will now be the people to access the community. So it's really important to respect the structure that are in that specific setting, like in a refugee setting, get to adhere to the policies that are already in place, and then you involve the people, both the local leaders and also those people that are not in leadership. Thanks.
Thank you, Bull. And I think this may be a question perhaps someone in the attendees may also be thinking of asking. But so it comes off as if you basically have to try and partner with what are the existing sort of organizations, aid organizations, and other sort of entities that are basically delivering some of the services there. Now, do some of these usually have opportunities that you can sort of work with them or directly engage them to just support the activities that they do? Or does it always have to be like, for example, in your case, you have your organization that sort of partners with them and then helps to deliver the project?
So other organizations may have opportunities for partnership. There are those that are already in place, and you'll have to tell them exactly you want to partner because to provide these solutions. But there are other organizations that do not have such opportunities, and you'll have to seek the top leader and explain to them in person exactly what it is that you want to do and how it will be of importance to the people in the local setting, like in the refugee setting. So if they get to buy your idea, then they'll be able to partner with you. But if they don't get to buy your idea, then it will be hard. So there are those that have already set policies on how to partner with them, and there are those that do not have, and you have to approach them in person and sell your idea in person so that they get to accept it. Yeah.
Thank you. And just a follow-up question, and this might be a bit extra than what I would have you were probably asked to do, but based on experience, why do you think it's necessary to have such sort of, if I may say, rigid protocols or approaches towards working with this community? Why do we have to go through so many administrative channels? Why is it important? Because evidently it comes off as these are sort of roadblocks that if anybody would want to engage would have to encounter. But why do you think they have to be equally important, or why are they vital in the place that they are?
Can I answer that before Bull says talks?
Yeah.
I think it's important for any community to have a form of structure, from street families to children's homes to villages, because to avoid other organizations, to avoid other people from taking advantage of them. Because if they didn't have a leader to speak on their behalf, they didn't have a strict protocol to get to the target audience, most of them would have been taken advantage of, most of them would have been hurt in the process. And the protocols are there to ensure that you understand where these people come from and what is their issue and how best should you approach them. So you get that most of the leaders will tell you in this children's home, most of these children come from families that are broken. They come from, violent homes. Maybe these refugees come from countries that have gone through maybe nuclear wars, etc. And this is what you should do, and this is what you shouldn't do. Yeah, maybe Bull can say something better.
Thank you for the perspective, Angela. I think he's having some issues with his connectivity, but I think you've brought a very important point here as well, that just as equally as you may feel that your engagement and intervention is sort of trying to make an impact, you have to be cognizant that it's equally easy for such populations to be taken advantage of, which is why it's important for you to appreciate and recognize that while these are hindrances, you have to follow the right channels because your interest is supposed to be protecting them at the end. Thank you. Mr. Kimani, please do share your insights on how we can effectively be able to approach and work with the street population if anybody would want to, and how where somebody can start off from, basically, based on your experiences.
I wanted first of all to just talk about something that has been mentioned about what you'd call hindrances. I think to me those should be called resources, because all these gatekeepers, it looks like a lot of red tape, but eventually when you start working with the population, the people whom you would have looked at the beginning as a hindrance, including, for example, in Eldoret, to work with street children and youth, you have, first of all, to be recognized by the government. You have to register. And but before you do that, the key thing is the population itself. But once you start providing services, for example, feeding, you'll come to quickly realize that the government will not allow you to feed children. Once you'd even want to have a big event with them on the ground, the government would come and ask you who you are you registered, and where are you based? So therefore, you realize those some of the challenges that might be something to overcome. However, all these people and the red tapes are actually resources. So if you look at them that way, it becomes very, very easy to be able to now, in case there are challenges with them, to be able to realize how you can tackle that challenge. When you meet the registrar and the other people that you need to register the organization with, you would realize that in the near future, you'll have to come back to them. So if you approach them with a positive attitude, with an open heart, and you do not look at them as a hindrance, although they might provide a lot of it. And sometimes they come out as very authoritative, very policing. They also mean, you know, and there is also that all the thing that you know about Kenyan government and Kenyan government officials, they are corrupt and all that. But that's none of your business. Go there. Your target is street children. Work with the government. Do what is necessary. But then sometimes it's easier to work with existing partners like Elijah has mentioned. You necessarily don't have to reinvent the wheel. If you're providing a service that is medical, just, for example, come to Tumaini or talk to another organization that works with street children, and you'll be able to be supported very well to be able to meet the population. So one, look at all those hindrances and red tapes as resources, because they are resources. The government is a resource. The street children, the youth who will make your life difficult on the street are actually a resource in the long run. The people who register you and other partners are all resources. I think that's the underlying thing. But then, like, just to answer your question, use a platform that others have already created. It makes your work very, very easy. Yeah.
Thank you for the insight, and I think it's how you've tremendously brought out how what otherwise come off of these roadblocks or red tapes, as you mentioned, are actually to the best of your benefit in your work with the community. It's quite tremendous, and I think most of the times we always, when we are at the sort of the early phases of any engagement, we always see that, oh, you know, we have to fulfill all these requirements, we have to go through all these processes. But like you mentioned, at the end of the day, all these will actually come back to you, and in the long run, will actually be more helpful to you in the impact that you're trying to even realize ultimately.
Yeah.
Thank you. So with that, we have our last question, or the last objective that we would want to tackle, and would invite our panelists to be able to give their insight. Oh yes, he's joined in. So Bull is back. So in this case, the last part is now, so we've been able to sort of engage, we've been able to approach the community, we've started off our community project or our engagement with whatever population that we've decided to work with here. Now, how do you end up effectively building that trust, creating that rapport that you need, and effectively trying to communicate what your goal is in that project, and ultimately, therefore, being sustainable in the solution or the project that you're trying to work with in this case? Angela, maybe you can give your insight first.
What I'd say is language. Language is the first point or gate towards creating rapport. You need to know how they communicate, what's their language. Is it Sheng? Is it the Luo? Is it Kikuyu? Is it English? And you also need to understand their slang. And as much as there's language, you also need to understand their slang. How do they call food? How do they call playing, etc.? And you also need to dress like them, act like them. You know, you can't go to, let's say, you can't go to, let me use my community. You can't go to the Luya community they're on a table eating, and then you pretend that you don't have, you don't have the appetite, you don't eat the type of food. Okay, you might not be eating that kind of food, but at least pretend you like it. You have to pretend you like it. You have to pretend, not pretending, but you have to try and fit in. Talk like them, act like them. That's how you create rapport, and that's how they accept your ideas and they accept you to be part of the change.
And that is ultimately what will help prolong and sort of continue the engagement that you want to continue with, and ultimately help in the sustainability of the whatever you want to do in that case.
Yeah.
Great, thank you. I think language is very key and one of the most important points that have sort of come out from this. Bull, please do share your insights. How do you think after that initial engagement and approach, how do you now ensure that you've built that rapport and built that trust with the community you're working with, and ultimately help bring your project and whatever you're aiming to do into a sustainable and long-lasting project that you would want to have going and benefiting the community for a long time?
Yeah, one special thing that you'll notice about refugees, in a refugee setting, it's not like a permanent setting. Not everyone is supposed to be there all the time. So there are policies with refugees that once you've been a refugee for a specific period of time, then you can either be repatriated, or you can be resettled, or you can be absorbed in the country or something like that. So the main thing that can help you a lot in any project with refugees is to train quite a number of people that are in there. So if you train people, they can be able to ensure sustainability of that project in that particular place. So those people that you feel can be able to reach out there on your behalf. So like with the COVID awareness that we were doing, and the 20 youths, young people that I trained as ambassadors, even right now, as I'm in my hostel room in Egerton University, the project is still going on, because these people are able to ensure that there's continuous water that is running, there's soap, there's people are given every new information about COVID, and the local people know exactly what it is and what they're supposed to do through the training that I did with the local ambassadors, the youths that are able to make sure that the project is being sustained and it's going through. So the secret that I've learned out of that: train people, don't do it alone, involve people. Thanks.
Thank you. And I think that may have also involved empowering the same people you've been working with as well, so that they can ultimately have the same impact on the community that basically ripples across to the much larger
Absolutely.
numbers in that case.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. And lastly, Mr. Kimani, please do share your insights on how can we then thereafter, we've built that, we've taken the approach, how can we then ensure that we can communicate effectively with the community we're working with and build that rapport and trust that we want to ultimately see our work going to become sustainable and long-term, long-lasting?
So for me, I think I'll just echo what the others have actually mentioned. And one of it is that it is the language you go with. And I would want to add something, quote unquote, your love language. Basically, your the language that you may not speak in words. Because for street children, they are very, very keen to see how you greet them, how you walk, how you sit next to them. And that is very key. If they realize that you when you're greeting them, you're greeting them with the tip of your fingers. However much you say you're coming with all the goodies, they will not be able to like that. So be very keen about your body language, quote unquote, your love language, how you're able to embrace people and feel you're part and parcel of them. The next thing is the best way to build a rapport is to also be careful to notice that there are so many resources within the same people you are serving and their environment. So for example, when you're serving street populations, you look at the dam site and where they are hanging around as there's nothing there, but there's so much that you can use at that very, very space to support them. So be keen to realize that as you go there, you do not necessarily, when that makes them feel good when you are taking advantage of the resources that they currently have rather than bringing your own. That's why many people get really disappointed when they take food to the street, they take all these things, and then the street kids just take all for grabs, especially the stronger ones. And you feel like, why did they do that? It's because you are not careful to understand what they really wanted and the resources that they have within themselves. And just to echo what Elijah said, it's just building systems and building a team. That when you build a system, it's simply like, for example, building an accounting system like QuickBooks, where you necessarily don't have to do all the bookkeeping with your hand. The software does it for you. So use technology, because technology is here with all of us to build a system that, for example, you may not necessarily need to be there, and the system works for you. So that someone may ask, so how do you do that? For example, street population. We have been able to develop a course that goes all around all the other courses that we provide at the vocational school. We call it the Foundational Engineering course because it's just simple basic engineering, but using design thinking. And that is tablet-based, meaning anybody can teach those kids and they'll be able to, together with those kids, come up with problems that are faced in the community and develop solutions. So the kids have, for example, have come up with solutions like a solar alarm system because they went and talked to the community. And the teachers who are working with them are not engineers. Yes, they had an engineer providing oversight, but a lot of the things that came out there were from an instructor that teaches hairdressing, for example, going out there and listening to the community together with the kids and coming with the solutions. So technology is key. The other one is like truly build a team that you don't have to be there on the ground and the team will still do the work for you. That is key. So train people, build the next leader, and if possible, leave a solution that can go on within the community without necessarily you having experts. So how, for example, if you are providing, well, you know, you guys are medical students, you're going through 7 years of studying. So you wonder how I can leave some of the solutions there with the people, but you can train community health workers, CHWs, and they can be able to do the rest for you. Community health volunteers, they can do everything for you after that. And then you can now use local doctors and clinical officers and nurses to do that. So that when you come up with a solution, when you're gone, the solution does not go away with you. So be very key at also building the community to continue the program beyond you. However technical the problem is, because you can use technology, unfortunately, if sorry for the doctors, to replace a doctor in some sense, but not replace entirely, because humans are just, the capability of a human is beyond a machine. But then there are things you can use technology that that can help the community to continue without your presence. So that is very important. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Kimani. And I think you've really been able to sort of sum up and really enforce the other points as well, in that language is not just about the vocalization that you're doing, but rather also the subtle cues that you come with when you're trying to work with the community. And you want to try and integrate as much as possible and not come off as an outsider who's bringing in new solutions that you just want to pass off. And I think there's another point you had mentioned in the beginning, that you don't expect the community to come to you. You have to go to the community yourself. And that means that the setting that the community has is where you have to work in, and you have to try and realize your solutions best in the same setting that community exists in. And then lastly, a point that Bull also echoed and also you've brought out, in that it's not heroic to be the only one with the solutions, but your true success will be measured by the lasting impact you've been able to leave in the community, and being able to carry on with the work that you've started off and being able to do it independently. And that's a true measure of what sustainable impact would be. Okay, and with that, I think we've reached the last part of our session for today. So in the last bit, we'll now basically just be inviting questions that we have from our audience over here. So we have one question that was shared already by Eden Humus. So I'll just say it out loud. If And then thereafter, if anybody else has any other question, you can please feel free to just type it out in the chat box, or you're also welcome to just unmute yourself and ask the question and direct it to whichever panelist you would like to. So the question that Eden asks is, while carrying on with your initiative, is it a must for your team to be a registered group, or can one just go ahead and do what they would wish to? So I think this is a very important question that sort of needs to seek insight from almost all these panelists from here. So maybe we can start with Angela. What do you think? Do you think that it's necessary for any initiative you set up to be formally registered and set up before you try and go and make an impact, or can you just, in quotes, wing it?
It's important for you to be registered for accountability in case of anything that happens to the kids or the adults you're interacting with. How will they identify from which channel do they use to blame you or to make you accountable of what has happened? If you are a student and maybe the official ways of registering your initiative, Kimani can comment on that. But as a student, it's easier for you to identify with the student organizations. If you're a medical student, it's easier for you to have an initiative and identify yourself as part of MSACE because MSACE is registered. Or for your initiative, you partner with an already established organization, for example, World Vision or any organization that is identified by the government, so that you can be accountable for anything you do. Yes.
Thank you, Angela. And I think Bull can also echo his remarks on that, perhaps, because he's also a student like us. So Bull, what level of registration would you think is important? And first of all, is it really important for you to register first? Or can you be flexible about it and try to still have the impact you want to?
Now, when you're working with refugees, which is so unique in this situation, there are specific projects that you must have registered, and there are projects that you don't need registrations. So if you're trying to provide lasting impacts, like maybe providing scholarships to refugees, because education is kind of neglected because maybe the priority is with food or something like that. So with such solutions, you have to be registered, because there's no way that you can go and take refugee children out of refugee camps into some public schools or maybe private schools elsewhere, and there's no way that you can account for how you're going to take care of them. So such solutions need registration. But let's say you're providing simpler services, like let's say you've noticed that people in refugee camps do not wear face mask because of COVID, simply because maybe not because they do not want to wear them, but maybe because they do not have them and you've decided to go and distribute them. So with such, you come with a face mask and you go to the relevant authority and tell them, this is what I want to help the refugees with. And with such, you don't need registration. You just go there and provide the service. So there are activities that you need registration, and there are those that you do not need registration. But it's way better if you get to register early enough, maybe with an organization that you're partnering with, or maybe, that you own, and then you partner with another registered organization. It will be easier like that.
Okay, and I think, like you've mentioned, the level of engagement equally is a very important determining factor, because the point that Angela brought about the safety of the population you're working with really has to be determined by the kind of interaction you want to have, and all that will come down to who you are and what you're representing when you're working with these populations. And I mean, giving out the face mask, for example, may be more of a one-off interaction, but then supporting somebody through a scholarship, as you mentioned, needs a lot more lengthy thought. And you do want somebody who can be identified by an organizational status at least. Thank you. Mr. Kimani, I think you can give us now the other perspective of it, because I mean, here you're talking, the Tumaini Center, for example, is an independently registered organization. So how do you think that has been, has that been proven beneficial to you? And what would you say to, for example, us as students, or novel entrants into community engagement? How does the registration aspect assist, and is it important or not?
I would say it's both yes and no. Yes, it's important to register them, but also you can do the lean approach when you're designing a program to reduce on the waste and the time it takes to all the registration and the resources you need to register, for example, if you're a student. So lean approach looks at it this way. For example, if you want to help street children that are disabled, let's say with a wheelchair, it is important that you do not necessarily have to go buy the wheelchair before going to them. For example, the lean approach would say you go talk to them, find out if they really want a wheelchair. And then the next time you go, the second time, the prototype should be basically, even possible, a picture of a wheelchair, and talk to them about this is how it looks. So that will help you a lot as you're building the program. So if you want to go and provide a healthcare solution to a community that is hard to reach, sometimes the best thing is to just to reach there to the community. Of course, you might need the permission of gatekeepers, the government and staff. And sometimes if you ride on top of an existing organization, it becomes very easy. But then when you want now to provide the service, go and talk to them. People have built products that they want to provide with paper mache. They have drawn it on a piece of paper. They have taken a picture of it. They have shown a video to the population they want to serve. So that's the lean approach. Instead of coming up with the complete package, come up with a prototype that is very cheap to build, and then test it. Once you test it out with the people you're going to serve, that is very human-centered, because you did not just come up with the solution, you thought about them and you wanted to hear their opinion, and it's very cheap. It avoids a lot of waste, because you did not, for example, if you go with that wheelchair and they say I don't like it, you've bought a whole wheelchair that is very, very expensive, or maybe even bought 50 pieces and they totally reject all of them. What if you just went to the picture and they said, oh, if this wheelchair was like this? Because it's key, because sometimes when you're providing Samaritan help, we feel like we are the saviors. We should give them, they should be appreciative. It is very wrong to look at people who are poor or at risk as if they need you. They actually do not need you sometimes. They are surviving on their own. And sometimes it's us who go to, most of the time actually, it's us who go to them. They rarely come to us. And so when you go outside there, do not go with a savior mentality. Go out there with something simple, something very affordable, and listen to them. If this is what they want as a prototype, then build the rest together with them. Yeah, so the lean approach is key.
Okay,
Thanks.
thank you for the insight, Mr. Kimani. I'm not seeing any more questions in the chat box. Do any of the other participants, the attendees, have any questions? Please feel free to unmute yourself and you can ask a question directed towards any panelist if you'd like. Any questions, any comments, any concerns? Okay, I think if we still have the, we'll just be taking in the closing remarks, but in case you do have any questions, you can still just type them out and then we can reach out to the individual panelists and have them respond, and then we can direct them back to you. But essentially, this basically now brings the end towards our discussion for today. I think that's why we don't have a lot of questions coming in, because it's the first part, and I'm sure the attendees are definitely processing in a lot of this. And as we go along with the rest of the series, we'll have more insights coming in and more of these questions coming up as well. So just to, in the tail of end of it, I'd like to just ask for some closing remarks from our three panelists. Just 1 to 2 minutes of your what you would like to leave our attendees with to go home, to basically close this session off, as what are the most vital aspects to consider in your perspective. So maybe we can start with Bull.
Yeah, the closing remark that I would like to give to all of you concerning refugees is refugees are people like you and I. They're just normal people with simple needs that are so common with any other person. So it's really important that we get to recognize refugees that are living among us, maybe in the urban setting, or maybe that are coming from refugee camps or something like that. And we recognize them as simply as human beings, because that's exactly who we are. Thanks.
Very beautiful indeed. Thank you, Bull. Angela, your closing remarks, please.
What I'd just say is the solution is always with you, and always do everything with the consideration that they're just like you and everyone needs love. Yes.
Everyone needs love, that's for sure. Finally, Mr. Kimani, your closing remarks, please, for what you would like to leave our attendees with for today.
For me, passion added with knowledge and tools. So you're passionate about what you want to do. There's a lot of information out here. There's a lot of people you can talk to. There's you can Google stuff, get to add all the information, do some literature background about the project you want to do, get all the information, take a notebook and your laptop, sit down with a cup of coffee and get information. And then build a tool. Make it very, very simple. Do not worry about how you're going to register it or you're going to build the next skyscraper or the next Nobel Prize award winner solution. Just make it simple. So just add your passion, knowledge, and tools. Yeah.
Thank you. So the triad of community engagement, basically, and simplicity being integrated in each aspect of it. Thank you so much, Mr. Kimani. So just with that, I would like to, first of all, this brings us to the tail end of this discussion session for today. First of all, I'd like to start by saying thank you very much to Angela, Bull, and Samuel. Thank you so much for taking out your time to be with us and to share your very valuable insights and your experiences. I'm sure that the discussions today have definitely been very inspiring and generated many ideas amongst our attendees and participants today on possible areas in ways that they can start engaging the communities around them with. And I think you've really helped to provide a very structured approach that we can really take this with. And this definitely helps make sure that you have the right idea and the right approach from the right outset to begin with. So to sum up, this has been the first session of the Bridging Gaps course, which is basically a capacity building course to help empower medical students to be able to engage and conduct community outreach, to be able to have a lasting impact in the communities and society around them. So this has basically been it's a collaboration between Musamu, FAMSA represented by SCOMER, and Musake represented by SCORP and SCOMI, which basically is a 4-part series, and this was the first part of it. And we'll be having sessions for this every week in this month. So we do look forward to having you here in the next sessions as well, and definitely having more participants as well. So please do feel free to go and reach out to your colleagues and your peers to attend. And if they're not able to tune in for live, as you know, this has been streamed live on YouTube, and they can also be able to have a glimpse of the recording later on. But one of our panelists, Bull, has left us with a very beautiful quote at the end here. True greatness is in tireless service to the undeserving. Anyone can serve. Go out there and be great. Just serve. Very beautiful closing remark that we can all leave with. So thank you so much. I'd like to invite Cheryl.
Hello, can you hear me? You froze, your video froze, so I'm not sure if you
Like
can
to
hear
add
me.
on any announcement that she'd like to make. Thank you so much for having me as well as the moderator of the session. I forgot to introduce, definitely.
I'm sorry. Hello, I didn't get the last part. I hope you can all hear me. But I'd really like to just take this opportunity to thank Samuel Kimani, Mr. Samuel Kimani, and Miss Angela Nabiro, and Mr. Bull Elijah for taking part in this session and equipping us with knowledge, and actually feel very inspired because there's like been a few ideas that I had, but I didn't know how to go about it. So I think this just gave me a really good foundation to start on, and I'm really grateful for that. Secondly, I'd really like to thank you guys for joining us today, and I hope that you will continue to join us for the next sessions. The sessions will either be on Friday or Saturday, so we will update you earlier than we did this week. Sorry for that, but it'll come. The notification will come earlier, so stay tuned for that. And yeah, that's all I have to say. So I think you can have please have a great weekend, and I'll see you next week. Okay, bye guys.